Hey there, and welcome to the Hey There Thrival podcast. I'm your host, Emily Haig, and in this podcast, we talk more than just the usual topics, and we are a frump-free zone. Our guest today is an expert with 17 years of extreme dadding experience. That's right, extreme dadding. Twin dad Joe has been talking to other dads and solving problems for 17 years. In today's episode, he's going to cover what you need to spend on, what you need to know as a dad and what can wait, what mum should know about dads and how to best support them and communicate with them, as well as his exclusive learnings across those 17 years that you'll want to tune in for. Now, if you enjoy this show, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'd love it if you could give us a rating so that we can get this show sent to more parents just like you to help them thrive rather than just survive. Okay, let's jump in. Joe, welcome to the Hey There Thrival podcast. It's great to have you joining us today. Could you please give the audience an introduction as to who you are and what you do?
Hey everybody, my name is Joe Rawlinson. I live in Austin, Texas with my family of 6. My wife and I have 4 children, ages 20, 18, and my identical twin girls are 17. So we have a house full of fun all the time. I've been helping fathers of twins along their twin journey ever since my girls were babies. I've been running dadsguidetotwins.com ever since then, helping thousands of dads, like some of you listening all across the world, on their twin dad adventure.
Wonderful. Well, you certainly have. 17 years is a lot of learning, so I'm really looking forward to getting more into that today. And I'm sure you've got some great learnings from having a house full of teenagers as well, which is no doubt keeping you entertained.
Yes, teenagers are kind of similar to toddlers in a lot of ways. So those early years of twins and babies help prepare you for the future in their own special way.
I bet, except they can drive real cars. So.
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Joe. So I'd love to hear a bit about your why. So you've mentioned that you've got twins, that you've been doing this for 17 years. Let's dig in a little bit more as to how that started and how you ended up writing this book, or your first book.
When we found out we were having twins, at that time we already had 2 little boys, and I went looking for information for dads about what was going to happen with twins, what was in my future. And all the information I could find, be it online or in books, was from a mom's perspective. And dads often had like a footnote in a book or a couple paragraphs in a chapter. And so I thought, well, there's more to the story there than what is being presented to me. So I kind of stowed that away in my mind because I had bigger things to worry about, which was preparing for my own twins. And so when my girls were maybe 6 or 9 months old and I could actually breathe and catch my breath, I decided to just start sharing what I was learning through my experience. I started dadsguidetotwins.com as a blog, just sharing things that I learned that day, maybe some takeaways, some practical tips from that perspective. And just started doing that on a consistent basis. Dads started discovering that from all parts of the world. And then, they would start to send me questions and I could share what I was experiencing. And ultimately that led to me starting a podcast by the same name, Dad's Guide to Twins podcast. And I ended up writing 2 books because as I mentioned earlier, there weren't a lot of books. There were no books. There were no books at that time for fathers of twins. And so I wrote Dad's Guide to Twins, which was my first book to help dads through the pregnancy, help them get ready for the twins. And then my second book, Dad's Guide to Raising Twins, kind of covers those first several years with twins, some of the challenges that dads can expect. And so it's been a fun journey, helping dads from all over, hearing their stories now, dads that discovered me when they were having the news if they were expecting twins, now coming on my podcast, and they've got 5, 6, 7-year-old twins sharing what their experience has been like. So it's been kind of a fun, full circle journey this whole time.
Fantastic. I'm thrilled that you exist because I certainly have noticed that there is a gap for dads. And I have had a lot of conversations with my partner in particular about what is the role and what information do you need to know. So I think it's absolutely fantastic what you've done. And I hope that people really enjoy this episode. I'm sure they will. Now, I have to ask, 17 years, what are your biggest markets? You must have every continent for sure.
Well, the United States, being an American myself, is the biggest reach that I have right now. Mm-hmm. But anywhere English is spoken, I mean, I've got folks in the UK and Australia, New Zealand, but also other countries. Now it's easier than ever for people to, translate the content into their local language and get that insight as well. I just heard from a parent in Argentina the other day who had some questions for me. They actually wrote to me in Spanish, which I can conveniently also speak Spanish, but my content on my website is not in Spanish. So they were just asking me a question. I was able to help them with that. So it's been fun to hear from people from all corners of the world.
Yeah, I bet it's absolutely wild. I must say, I'm seeing the world light up with all these different countries coming together. Did you know that Africa actually has the biggest amount of multiples
I believe it.
statistically? Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. I saw someone with 8 babies the other day and I was very, very impressed. So look, let's keep going on. I'd love to hear your twin story. Obviously, it has been a little bit of time. What type of twins do you have? And just talk me through that finding out moment and how that went.
So my girls are identical girls. They are, well, we found out that they were monochorionic diamniotic. So they shared a placenta, but they had their own amniotic sacs. And because they're identical, it's just completely luck of the draw, random. There was no family history involved of twins. So we had no idea that was going to be happening to us. We didn't even really consider it a possibility. Like I mentioned, we had 2 singleton boys before. So when we got pregnant the 3rd time, we just thought, well, we're adding a 3rd child to our family. In fact, my wife had scheduled an appointment with her doctor to confirm the pregnancy. She had taken the home pregnancy test. And because I had gone with her on the previous couple pregnancies, and now we had 2 very active toddlers at home, I said, honey, why don't you go to the doctor? I will watch the boys. We'll drop you off. We'll pick you up. That way you don't have to worry about them, or we don't have to find a babysitter for the boys. And so she went to the doctor to confirm the pregnancy. I'm in the car driving around waiting for her to be finished. And she calls me on the phone and says that she's ready. And I asked, how did it go? And she said it was fine. She was able to get an ultrasound. And I said, well, that's great, because it seemed kind of early to get an ultrasound. And I asked how everything looked, and she says, fine. They had healthy heartbeats and everything looked great. So I was very happy that it was positive news. And then I had to pause for a second because I realized that she had said healthy heartbeats, plural. And so I'm like, heartbeats? And she says, yeah, we're having twins. So she told me while I was on the phone, my boys are in the back seat of the car, making a bunch of noise. And I was just completely surprised. And somehow in my dazed state, I drove to the doctor to pick her back up and got her back home. But that's how I found out that we would be having twins was through that.
Right. So it sounds like you didn't have the case where the doctor says, we're going to bring you in for an early check because I think there's something with the amount of hormones with twins is higher. So that wasn't something that you'd heard at that point, it sounds like.
No,
Or
this was
perhaps
just the standard first test to verify that the home pregnancy test was accurate. That's all this was. So
interesting.
we just expected confirmation and nothing more, and we got twice as much.
Yeah, a miracle. Well, identical twins are a miracle, really. It is, you hit the lottery if you have those because it's not exactly super common. Did you rush out and buy a lottery ticket? I'm hoping you have that in America. Was that the one?
Maybe I should, if I felt like I was so immediately worried about how am I going to pay for all this stuff that I didn't think
Right.
I should go gamble the money away on a lottery ticket. But
Yeah, processing. Okay. I mean, I guess at that first moment, there's a lot of things that can go through your head, including shock. So understandable. So talk me through, what was the funniest or most memorable response from your friends or family when you announced this?
well, we found out that we'd be having twins on Christmas Eve, and the very next day we were actually flying across the country to visit my wife's family. And so we had no time to process the news that we would be having twins, but we knew we'd have to share that news with family once we got there. And so we quickly found a couple of picture frames in our house, and we printed out the picture of the ultrasound that showed each of our babies. And we printed on there, save space for me. I'm arriving in later this summer. And then we had the second frame that said, save space for me too. And so we stacked these frames together and we wrapped them up and we gave them as a Christmas present to both my parents and my in-laws. And so the funniest thing was to see them open the present, and my mother-in-law thought that we had just given her some nice picture frames. And so she had to do a double take to look at the pictures and then solve the puzzle of, oh, wait, you're going to have a baby. That's great. Oh, wait, you're going to have two babies. And so that was, it took, the funny part was knowing they did discover that eventually, but just watching the wheels turning in their mind and then boom, complete shock. We were the first ones to have twins on either side of the family. So there was no precedent for that.
Fantastic. I do think that's one of the fun moments when you have multiples, is that moment where you tell people and you watch them react. There's so many ways to do it, but it is always quite entertaining. A lot of people these days film it, which makes for great social media, I guess. Okay, so let's go to the very beginning, Joe. So Dad's navigating pregnancy and baby arrival preparation. What would you say are those initial need to knows? Again, the birth mother is pregnant and the baby's going to arrive. For a dad that's now processed, okay, having twins or multiples, what do you think would be the main groupings of need to knows at that point early on?
Well, the priority is the health of your partner and the health of the babies. And so making sure that mom is getting the prenatal care that she needs, the regular appointments, the checkups, to make sure everything's on track for that to happen. I mean, that was my first priority, make sure my wife's going to be okay and the babies are going to be okay. And then once I was planning to help her with those appointments, help watch my boys, or go to the appointment myself with her. That was kind of one of the big priorities was health and monitoring of the pregnancy. But most of the other stuff was, pregnancy-wise, was out of my control as a dad. I was not the one growing the babies. I was on the outside looking in. And so my second big effort was around what can I prepare logistics-wise in the house for the arrival of my babies. And so a lot of the focus came down to, let's start making the lists of what we need to purchase that we don't already have, because we already had two little boys. So we had some baby gear in the house so we could reuse, but we didn't have double, we didn't have double stroller. We didn't have two car seats, stuff of that nature. So I really tried to shift gears quickly to focus on the practical preparations that I can make, things that were within my control. And so when dads find out that they're having twins, it's really overwhelming. I know my mind raced immediately ahead to way in the future, like, how am I going to pay for college? What about two weddings? And it's just crazy. When the reality was, I need to just think a few months ahead to what's coming next, and then tackle those challenges. And when I solve those, go to the next ones. And so kind of make it into bite-sized chunks instead of just getting overwhelmed by all the possibilities of what could happen.
That's great advice. And then with moving towards baby arrival, are there any particular areas that you think a dad should learn about? So maybe they're attending medical appointments, maybe not, in terms of what type of twins they've got. And then they're starting to get to that delivery piece, whether they're going to be in the room and what sort of delivery it is. Any areas that you think help as a dad to understand?
Yeah, but part of the going to the doctor's appointment with my wife was, it gave me the opportunity to ask questions to the doctor directly, to see with my own eyes the ultrasounds, to see the progress of my girls. And that helped me prepare mentally for their arrival. Because for a lot of the pregnancy, from the outside looking in, it looks just like a regular pregnancy, like with the boys we had previously. And so it was kind of a surreal thing. Be like, well, I see my wife's pregnant. Last time she looked like this, we were just having one baby, but I would go to the doctor and I'd see the two baby on the monitor. But one thing we talked a lot about with my wife and I was, how do we want these babies to be delivered? And we talked with the doctor about what the options would be. Both of our previous pregnancies had resulted in cesarean sections. Our first son was, we tried to deliver him vaginally. He got stuck, and so my wife had to have an emergency C-section to deliver him. Our second son, she didn't want to go through that, so she's like, just give me a C-section and take him out. And so with the twins, as a dad and as a partner to my wife, I'm like, honey, what do you want to do this time? and I'll support you, whatever that's going to be. If you want to try to deliver the babies vaginally, or if you want to have a C-section, I'm fine with whatever. And so she again wanted to do the C-section because she knew what that experience would be like. It was more predictable for her. As we approached the delivery time, it turned out that one of our girls was kind of sideways. And so she wasn't even in a position to come out vaginally if we had wanted to do that. And so us planning for a C-section was what would have had happened anyway. But dads need to know that sometimes you plan for one thing, say we want to have a natural birth with twins, which is possible, but at the last minute, the babies might not be in the right position, or there might be some complications with the baby, or the health of the mother may be at risk, and so you have to switch to a C-section. So you have to be flexible and roll with what happens and go with it, remembering that ultimately your main priority is health of the mom and health of the babies, whatever that's going to take.
Great. So understanding that there's multiple options for delivery, understanding that it also comes down to how the twins are positioned, and of course if there's medical complications as well, and advocating. I think that sounds great in terms of tips. And so with the medical appointments, obviously some partners are in a position where they can attend, some are not. Would you say there's any key appointments that if they can prioritise that within their means to attend, they're the best ones? For example, closer towards the end or early on? Just if there's dads thinking which appointments are the most important ones to go to before the babies arrive.
Anytime they're taking ultrasounds, which in our case, we'd have a doctor visit where my wife would get checked up by her doctor, and then that doctor would send her over to another office that had the machinery for the ultrasound. So depending on your situation, that may be done in the same office or may be done separately, but I would try to make it as much as possible to whenever they're going to take video and pictures of your babies. Early on, that made it very real for me that I could see with my own eyes my babies, even though I couldn't tell from the outside of my wife that there was two in there, nor could I feel any kicks or anything. I could still see them on the monitor. And as you get closer to the pregnancy, each appointment was kind of like, well, is there some surprise we don't know about yet that's coming up that means we're going to have early babies? I was always trying to be there so I could hear if there's any potential complications or what the doctor was estimating when the babies would be delivered. So at a minimum, I would try to go to those where you're getting some ultrasounds. But now you should even be able to ask the doctor for some video, or your partner, or if someone goes with your partner, and if you can't make it, like maybe her mom or a friend or somebody could take some video just on their phone of the ultrasound that they can share with you, would be very valuable.
Right, that's really good. And I think you can dial in these days as well. So even if you can't attend video phone, dial in as well. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I do know that is often a question as to how often should you attend, what's the value, and what sort of outcomes or insights do you get, which it sounds like making it more real and being on the journey and also getting the health information, which I know with identical is typically can be more complicated, especially if they've got shed sacs and placentas, etc.
One thing to add to that is that it really depends on dad's work schedule, his commitments. I had a job that was flexible enough where we would try to schedule those appointments during my lunch hour where I can leave work, go be with my wife, and then go back to work afterwards. So just do the best you can, Dad, based on your schedule. That's all we can do.
Yeah, I think that's great. Great advice. Now, how about the medical process and with medical professionals? My understanding is it's pretty universal that partners can be quite sidelined in the process by the medical systems, not necessarily the people doing it, but the processes and the involvement of dad not being mandatory, or it being very much focused on the health of the babies, as it should be. But also, I think there is a bit of a miss in terms of also understanding that there is often a partner involved that still needs to be brought on the journey. If there are people out there that are feeling like they're sidelined, that the doctors don't really pay them much attention or help them be taken along that journey, or the processes, etc., are very birth mum focused, any insights that you would share to dads in terms of if they're getting pushback or if they're experiencing those sorts of things?
Well, if you can go to the appointments and inject yourself physically into that room where you have an opportunity to ask the doctor questions, to look them in the eyes, to get their attention, that's going to be the surefire way to get to the head of the line as far as getting some attention. I didn't, I mean, obviously the focus of those appointments was on my wife and the babies. I understood that as a partner, but every so often I would have a question. I would want some clarification on something that they said or that they showed me on the screen. And I wasn't afraid to ask those questions and wait for the response and maybe do a follow-up question. So first of all, Dad, these are your babies, right? If you want to know something about them, you're going to have to ask. And if that may require putting yourself out there a little more to do that. If for some reason, because if you go to the doctor in the beginning of the pregnancy and the doctor is not treating you as a partner with respect and asking or allowing you to ask questions, maybe that's not the doctor that you want for this pregnancy. I mean, it needs to be somebody that's acceptable for both your partner and for yourself, because you're a team. I mean, you're a team here as parents. And so talk to your partner if those initial visits with a doctor just don't feel comfortable. It may be a sign that stuff down the road is also going to be a problem. Maybe when you're discussing your birth plan or complications or stuff like that, you want to have a very open communication with your doctor. You want to be very comfortable talking to them. And so if they don't really want to hear from you, Dad, that's kind of a red flag in my book that I would be worried about.
Thank you, Joe. And going through to the actual day of delivery and being in the room, I'm not sure about globally where all our listeners are, but I know that in most places the father is allowed to be in the room and there can be advice. For example, my partner was told, if you fall over, if you look, we were having a C-section, if you look across and you fall and hit the ground, no one's going to catch you. So don't look. If you're squeamish, or sit right down. What advice would you give, or I guess you've spoken to a lot of people about that delivery day and the varying scenarios. How would you advise a partner to prepare? And then what should they know to be doing, I guess, in that situation based on your years of speaking to other fathers?
Well, as you discuss the birth plan with your partner and with the doctor, Dad, you need to be in that birth plan. You need to express, where you want to be and how you want to interact with your partner and with the babies when they're born. Now, of course, the birth plan is the ideal scenario of what you would like to have happen. Medical needs may necessitate a complete change of that in the moment. And that goes back to being flexible with what the needs are to keep everybody healthy. But you should talk to the doctor about, where is Dad going to be during the delivery? And what would I be able to see? How will I be able to interact with my partner? How will I be able to interact with the babies? These are great questions that you can ask on your visits. I mean, you can even get tours of the hospital to see where all this stuff happens. So it's not just imagination in your mind. You can kind of visualize where these things will be happening. The reality is that we talked about dads being kind of sidelined. I always found myself off to the side during the delivery of all four of my children, the twins included. But I was glad to be there. And with my wife having a C-section every time, where they have a curtain below at her abdomen, so she cannot see what's going on below with the babies, nor could I. The doctor gave me explicit instructions: sit down on that chair and do not stand up until we tell you that you can stand up and look at your baby. Because like you said, they didn't want me to pass out or be a problem in the operating room. So it was me sitting next to my wife, who was laying down. She was staring up at the ceiling. And the other doctor next to us was the anesthesiologist, who was just monitoring to make sure my wife was okay. And so when the babies were delivered, the doctor said, you can stand up and take a look. So then I became the eyes for my wife, because she could not see what was happening. So I would try to describe what was happening to her so she can feel more a part of that, because when she's having a C-section, she couldn't feel a lot of that, nor could she see because of the curtain. So I've kind of stumbled in that. That's a role I did not expect to play in the operating room, was being my wife's eyes to describe what was happening. But that's what I did to try to fill her in as much as possible so she could be part of that experience.
Great. Okay, so be the eyes and make sure you have a plan. And just so everybody listening, if you haven't heard of a birth plan, because I certainly had it before I accidentally stumbled across one, a birth plan is essentially you and your partner and your medical team agree to what your optimal plan is. So whether you want it to be vaginal, if you want it to be C-section, the types of medication that you want, who's in the room, because it can be practice staff as well as the staff. Generally, there's a set of medical professionals for each of the babies that you're having. And so it's laying all that out and pre-discussing that with your medical team so they're on the same page. It's basically, I guess, a plan so that ideally your expectations are aligned and you're both comfortable and happy. And then, as Joe mentioned, it doesn't always go to plan. Sometimes people go for a vaginal delivery and then end up with C-section as well, especially with multiples, or there may be need for medication that people hadn't envisaged. So definitely get across that. And yeah, as we've discussed, learn about all scenarios. That way, I think you don't get that shock in that birth room. And being the eyes, I think, is definitely a great role for a partner to play as well. So thank you, Joe. Okay, so the deliveries happened, and now did your babies go to NICU, the intensive care unit for babies, or were they not? Did they not visit that unit?
No, fortunately, they did not. Our girls were born at 36 weeks of the pregnancy, and they were pretty healthy when they were
Wow.
born. I mean, the doctors did the checkups in the operating room immediately to make sure everything was fine, but they did not have to go to the NICU. And so they were with my wife and I for the duration of our hospital stay, which was 3 or 4 days until she was discharged. Our time in the hospital was really dictated by her recovery from the C-section to make sure that she was stable enough to return home. And then we all went home together.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that's great to hear. So there are many scenarios. I just want to call out again for listeners as you may go to the NICU, and as Joe mentioned, you can do hospital tours and actually see that. So if your babies do end up in the NICU, or if you are having multiple babies, it's highly likely that you will if they're quite early. So you can get a tour and go and look at that, but there's a scenario where you don't necessarily need to do that as well. So being prepared for all that is great. But wonderful to hear that your girls didn't go to NICU. That's always a great story with multiples. If you
Yeah,
can,
it is possible because we hear a lot about the cases where kind of maybe the more scarier situations where there's some kind of complication. Those are always a possibility, but it also possible to have a completely normal pregnancy, healthy birth, and healthy babies. I mean, that happens with twins. So don't get too worried about all the possible complications. If something comes up, deal with it in that moment and go from there. It is possible that your babies will be born and they will be immediately taken away for medical care, and you won't see them again for a couple hours. So that is a possibility too. So just enjoy whatever experience you get. Enjoy that moment because you're there. You're there, and you can see what you can see and live what you can live.
wonderful. Thank you, Joe. So engaging in building a support network. What are your thoughts here? And I'm talking about taking, I guess, friends and family on the journey, building a support network to support you once the babies come home. And so I'm talking about through pregnancy and then I guess after. What advice would you have for new parents that are expecting or they've just got their babies home in terms of how they might approach that? What are some tips that you've seen work really well?
Well, just sharing the experience that we had, we found that we needed help during the pregnancy, as well as after the babies were born. So my wife was put on, let's say, partial bed rest, where she was encouraged very strongly by her doctor to rest for several hours a day with her feet up. The challenge in our home was at the time we had 2 toddler boys that would run around in circles, nonstop energy. And so we devised a plan where we would hire a babysitter. We actually had a family across the street we were friends with, and they had a teenager, a high school teenager. She would come over in the afternoons, and she would play with our boys and interact with them while my wife could get some rest. And so that was part of the support network, was finding someone that could help with our family situation. In this case, the twins weren't even there yet. We needed still help to get through the pregnancy. And that led to thinking about what's going to happen once the twins arrive, because we knew we were still going to have our toddler boys who needed a lot of attention. Because when our twins were born, we had 4 kids ages 3 and under. And so there was still a lot of needs from all 4 of our kids that needed something all the time. And so we kind of recruited family who can come stay with us and how long can you stay with us? You know, we asked this question of all our family members, and we even recruited a family friend to come stay with us for about a month after the girls were born. And we tried to stagger those visits to stretch out the help as long as possible. after the girls were born. So we had maybe 2 or 3 months of coverage where there was at least 3 adults in the house helping to take care of everybody. And that kind of helped us get through that super crazy period of newborn twins.
Fantastic. And how did you build comfort with these friends and family, perhaps parents or parents-in-law that haven't had babies for a long duration, especially not twins? Was there anything you did to build that comfort up for perhaps if you were planning to leave them to look after the babies while you slept or left the house, etc.?
Well, one thing in those early months was I mentioned we had 3 adults all the time, my wife, myself, and a family member or a friend. There was always 2 of us on duty. So when the babies, when it was middle of the night, time to feed, 2 of us would get up to feed. One of us would take one of the babies, and the other adult would take one of the other babies to feed. And so there was a lot of shared moments together where my wife and a family member, or I and a family member, were together. So it's easy for us to observe how they interacted with the babies, or to ask them to do something differently if we prefer a different way of feeding or taking care of one of our girls. We only invited people that we already trusted them from family or a friend perspective. So getting them over that hurdle of how they interact with babies, sometimes it was a leap of faith, but we were desperate for help of any kind, even if it was just an extra pair of hands. And because we already had the toddlers, we figured, well, maybe if they're not as good with babies, maybe they can just play with our little boys, and that would itself be a relief to us.
So different types of help, and use people's skills or knowledge for different roles, or if they're with you and observing, etc., then you can get that safety. That's fantastic. And did you have any events, so gender reveals or pregnancy announcement, or I don't know if you do high teas or wet the head, which is some of the traditional celebratory events? Did you do anything like that to connect your community more to the fact that you had these twins coming, and to get them excited and engaged to be part of the journey?
A lot of our announcements were just one-on-one as we interacted with people. We would either invite them over to the house, or we would go visit them and share the news with them. So that kind of helped us connect on a more personal level with them instead of in a large group. We didn't have a large party or anything like that to announce that. We kept it into smaller, more personal groups.
Okay, fantastic. And have you heard about anyone in your 17 years, anything, I guess, fun that you want to share that people have done that worked in their scenarios?
One of the dads I interviewed on my podcast, they had made custom Chinese fortune cookies, and inside the cookie was the announcement that surprise we're having twins. So they had like a themed dinner. They invited some friends over, and then of course they opened the fortune cookie, and there's the news that it happened. So I thought that was a kind of a clever way to announce it. Very memorable.
I love that. So have a bit of fun with it and be creative. That's good. That's such a good idea. I haven't heard that one before. And so, what about people who struggle to accept help, and perhaps these are their first children, or perhaps they just haven't really asked for a lot of help with their first children if they've had ones prior to having their multiples? What would your advice be or your thoughts be for them?
I You're going to have to try it. You're either going to work really, really hard, or you're going to work a little less hard with some help. The reality is that twins require all of your attention and all of your partner's attention. And so if you want any kind of break, you really need to consider getting help. Ideally, if money was no object, if you had the budget, you would hire, a nanny or someone that can do that, but that's not really in the budget for a lot of folks. And so you have to be creative with how you get someone to come help. And at first, it's difficult to trust someone else to come into your home. It's a little easier if you're there too, interacting with them and they're working together as a team to do that. But even when I think about when my wife and I would first leave our kids alone with someone to babysit, the way we would always do that would be we would wait till our girls were in bed, asleep, and the babysitter's job was basically, in case of emergency, go take care of the baby, go take care of the babies, or give us a call. And those first times when we would go out of the house alone, it was for an hour, 2 hours maybe. We would just, maybe something simple like going to the grocery store or going to get a quick snack at a restaurant we liked. It wasn't long times away from the kids. And so that gave us opportunity to become more comfortable with the babysitter. Like, okay, I can trust you to just sit in the house, make sure everything's fine. And as their kids got older, or as we trusted the babysitters more, we'd invite them over earlier, where they would be in charge of getting the kids down for bed. And then we could have longer time. My wife and I could have longer time for an evening, if that's what the plan was.
That's great. So staging it and starting in small bites. Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, you can not ask for help, but it will be hard. And I think those who haven't had kids before maybe don't know what they're in for as well, with that relentless schedule of feeding and potentially not having sleep as well. So I would say, I mean, perhaps you agree with this, Joe, the sooner you can work out how to say yes or let people help in even minor ways, the better you'll be, because there'll be a crunch point.
Yeah, a lot of people, when you tell them you're having twins, will congratulate you and say something like, if you need any help, just let us know. It's a very open-ended thing that people say, but you need to hold them accountable to that. Make a list of these people that said they would help you. Ask them, well, what would you be comfortable doing? Would you be comfortable going to the store for us? Or would you be comfortable coming over and helping watch one of the babies while we do something else? Or just coming over to hold one of the babies? Or are you all in? Are you going to come over and spend the night at our house, wake up every 2 hours and help feed the babies? So if
Yes,
you're not right, so if you're not comfortable having helpers, at least make that list, because then when the reality hits you, when you bring those babies home from the hospital and you're completely sleep deprived and can't think straight, you can see that list on your counter and be like, okay, I'm going to give this person a call because they said they'd help me out. And I realize now, 2 or 3 days into this thing, that I really need some help. And so I'm going to reach out to the person that I trust and have them come over and give us a hand.
fantastic tips. And what do you think about all those people that offer saying, sure, food vouchers, cooked meals? Thoughts?
Well, those are golden too. Because you're so busy taking care of the babies that you don't have time to take care of yourself, or let alone, cook a meal, prepare food and stuff like that. You're busy making bottles of formula or helping feed the babies, change the babies. So if people want to stock your fridge and freezer with food, perfect. Or if they want to pay for a meal plan where they have the home delivery of food, perfect. Take it. We did a baby shower where the whole theme of the baby shower was pre-made freezer meals. So everybody brought freezer meals that they had made. And we just threw them in our freezer, stuffed our freezer. So then when it was time for dinner, we could just take something out of the freezer, pop it in the oven or pop it in the microwave, and we didn't have to think about it. So that was a huge help for us.
Brilliant. What a great idea. If I did my time again, I'd do that too. Freezer meal party. Are there any common hiccups that you have seen fathers have when it comes to, I guess, delivery day and the arrival of their children?
So from the dad's perspective, make sure that you have talked with your workplace, talked with your boss, with your manager, so that they kind of know what's coming. Now, your manager may have kids and they think they understand what having a new baby, or they think they understand what having twins is going to mean. But you need to make sure that you're explaining to them, well, twins come early. Like, I know most babies take 40 weeks. Twins are going to come in the 30-week range or more, or if there's complications, they can come earlier. So make sure, Dad, that you're always talking, when you get the update from the doctor, you need to share the relevant information with your employer so that they know, hey, my wife may need to go on bed rest. I may need to adjust my schedule, or there may be some complication with my twins. I may need to just leave work, right away and go to the hospital. And so you don't want to be stuck with problems with your employer. The other issue is making sure that you have a plan for, we talked about birth plan, but a logistical plan for you getting to the hospital, you getting your wife to the hospital, your partner to the hospital. What are you going to do with the other members of your family? Like, we had 2 other little kids. What's the plan for them? Who's going to watch them? Make sure you have all that ready to go so that when it's time, you don't have to worry about those details. You already have a plan in place and people to call.
Great tips. And with the work piece, what about paternity leave? I understand in America it's fairly low generally for birth mothers. I can't imagine what it is for fathers or partners. What would be your thoughts on that? Any learnings that you've had from speaking to other parents any tips that you'd pass on?
Yes, unfortunately, here in the United States, there's no standard paternity leave. Some of our states have longer required leave than others, but in most places, like in my case here in Texas, it was up to your employer to determine how much time they'd give you off um, for paid leave. If you wanted to take unpaid leave, there are some federal laws nationwide that can give you some more time off. But then you have to consider, well, if I'm on unpaid leave, who's going to pay for the babies and stuff like that? So that's a bit of a trade-off. We found in our experience and talking with a bunch of other dads is try to be strategic with your paternity leave, because if you only have a small amount of time that you can use to take off work, plan when that's going to happen. So in our case, I had planned to take a week off when our twins were born so that I can help in the hospital, get used to having twins, and then transition to home, help with that transition. But then, as I'd mentioned earlier, we had lined up some people to come stay with us, my in-laws and other family members. And so then I postponed the second half of my paternity leave until all the help went home. So everybody went home. And then I negotiated with my boss, because I only had 2 weeks off. So the first week was I used up right after birth. And then the second week, I said, what if I work half days? What if I come into the office for 2 weeks, just come in the mornings and work, and then I go home. And so that kind of stretched out how long I could support my wife as long as possible under the constraints that I had. So you kind of have to be creative with what you're given from your employer. But if you are talking with them, talking about your complications or the challenges that you're having and how you want to be creative with your time in the office, a lot of people will be empathetic to that, because they're like, oh my gosh, you're having twins. Okay, well, sure, we can help with that. Of course, not all employers are able to give flexibility like that, but it never hurts to ask for what you want as a dad, what you and your family need. And then if your employer pushes back, then you can adjust from there. But try to be creative with how you use your paternity leave. Do you use it all at once? Do you wait for it? Do you spread it out? Do you work a different schedule? Do you come in early or do you go in late? See what the options are.
Great tips. And what would be your thinking in terms of those who potentially have a NICU stay? Would you say it's more impactful to use any leave once the babies are actually at home? Or would you say to put part of that to potentially for a NICU stay?
A lot of the dads that I've talked to that spent time in the NICU, or their twins spent time in the NICU, they would kind of postpone their paternity leave until the twins came home. Because when the twins are in the NICU, they're getting all the care they possibly need. You've got a whole staff of people taking care of them. And so your interactions in the NICU are, you visit the babies, maybe you can hold the babies, maybe you can feed them. But the reality is you are not needed to do those things because there's already people there that do those things. So dads that I talked to that had babies in the NICU, they would have kind of their NICU visit schedule. Maybe they went before work. They'd go visit the babies. Maybe they went on their lunch break, or they would stop by the hospital on the way home from work to go visit the babies. Or maybe they'd take turns with their partner going in the evening after work to go visit the twins in the NICU. So that was, most of the dads I talked to would save the paternity leave until the babies were home and they felt like they could actually, they needed to use it at home to help take care of the family and the twins at that time.
Fantastic. Great consideration points for everyone. And I would say as well, just to reiterate, having that conversation with the workplace that you may go to the NICU, you may not. So that flexibility is really important. And again, knowing that you can potentially, mix it around, as Joe said, with hopefully lots of family members and friends that pop in at different stages as well. So you stretch it out. And I think another thing which I think you have I'd assume you have in America is sick leave or carers leave, if people can bank that up before the arrival of any multiples. Is that something that is possible in America or that you'd recommend as well?
Yeah, again, it's based on the employer. In my case, I got 2 weeks off paid leave, and it was basically sick leave to take care of a family member. There is something in the United States called FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, that does let you take extended time off without pay, and the employer kind of has to hold your spot and guarantee you still have a job when you go back. But that brings additional challenges in that you're not earning any income during that time frame. And if your partner is on maternity leave and you're on unpaid leave, that could be a financial, maybe too much of a financial burden for some.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, let's go on to the first year. For dads looking to understand their role in that first year, there's sleeping, there's feeding. I want to go into that a bit more. What would you say in terms of preparation and thinking about sleep and feeding and scheduling routines would be the most helpful things to know for expectant dads?
Well, I found that because I had the two singletons before, frankly, my wife took care of most of the feeding because she was breastfeeding our boys. And so I could usually sleep through most of the night to get up for work the next day. With twins, that was not going to happen at all. It required both of us to help out. And so I realized that when it's time for those feedings, every 2 to 3 hours in those first couple months, my wife and I would both get up. We'd each take a baby and we'd feed them. At that time, we were bottle feeding our girls, and so intellectually, I knew I was going to be sleep deprived, but I had no idea what it was actually how it was going to manifest in my life, where everything was always foggy. I was maybe short tempered. I couldn't always think through complicated problems at work. And so that sleep deprivation was brutal. And so I didn't know that that was going to be as bad as it was. On the flip side, being able to get up with my girls and feeding them, that was precious time for me to be able to hold one of my daughters, to feed her, to look into her face and to have that bonding moment with her, at 3 a.m. And then I wouldn't have traded that. I mean, the price was the sleep deprivation, but it was a great opportunity for me to connect with my girls. Because otherwise, if my wife had been just breastfeeding them by herself, I might not have had that opportunity as much as I did have. So for dads preparing for that first year, just prepare. You're going to be all hands on deck with the twins. You're going to be on duty all the time. You're going to be helping with something all the time. You're going to be helping with one of the babies. You're going to be helping with both of the babies. You're going to be doing something around the house because your partner's completely busy with the babies. You're always going to be doing something, and that's okay. That's that season of life, is to do that. And eventually your babies start to sleep longer. Eventually they start to sleep through the night. And then you sleep through the night too, because they sleep through the night, and things start to get better over time. And then you start to get your schedule back. You can start to add stuff back into your life that maybe you had to put on pause when the twins were born.
And any tools that you found really helped through that stage of the feeding and sleeping when they were quite young?
We had some rocking chairs that we would put the babies in. They were just like little bouncy seats where just their movement would help the baby move around and would kind of soothe them. So if both babies needed attention and there was just one of us available to help with the babies, typically we'd put one of the babies in the bouncy chair with a pacifier to try to hold them off while we tended to her sister. And once her sister was stable and calmed down, or whatever the situation was, then we can turn our attention to the second baby. So if any kind of gear that you can use to help soothe one of the babies, because there will be times where you can't handle both of them at the same time. You need some assistance. Your partner's not available. You just have to figure it out. So whether it's a bouncy seat or a play mat on the floor, or something simple, any kind of gear that could supplement you would be super helpful in that regard.
And did you use any time-back equipment, so automatic cleaners, heaters, things like that?
No, we were old school. We did everything by hand.
Oh
um,
gosh.
so we had endless bottles on the counter in the kitchen that we were constantly rotating through. I mean, we made sure we had enough where we didn't have to wash them every single feeding, so they would kind of stack up, and then we'd take care of them, usually before we went to bed at night, so that we'd be ready and supplied for the next day. But we didn't do any kind of automated things in that regard. I know there's lots of parents swear by that stuff now, where there's bottle warmers or formula mixers or anything in that regard. And those are great things to ask for on your baby registry too. Like, people may be willing to get those for you if you don't want to buy them for yourself. It makes life a little bit easier, But you could do it if you have to do it without those things. You can do it. You can figure it out. You'll find a system that works for you. Your kitchen's going to be a mess, and that's okay. Just roll with it.
Yeah. You're getting your systems. I will say that the trends that I see is that mostly becoming very efficient and very organized processes and teamwork with parents of multiples, or if you've got other children as well, is a common trait. You become more organized. Would you agree?
You do. In fact, routine and schedule is what helps you keep your sanity, and because it becomes a more predictable day, you know what's going to happen next, and in turn, the babies and the children know what's going to happen next, and they find comfort in that predictable pattern, which helps your babies and your infants and your toddlers prepare for the next step. If it's like, say, if it's bedtime, they know the bedtime routine. They know that means they're going to bed. They know they're going to sleep, and that consistency and predictability makes your parenting easier because everybody starts to get into a habit, and you don't have to fight with the kids as much as if every day was a different schedule, random events, which can really throw a wrench in the works.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. So, Joe, we've gone through a bit of stuff there. I think a really good one for dads as well is identity and self-care. So the identity obviously changes when you become a parent with multiples. You've got more going on. Let's just say that. How would you say a new father should think about their identity, and what should they do in terms of self-care to make sure they're able to have a cup to pour from?
So your identity really becomes a twin dad once your babies are born. And I found that friendships, friend groups, activities outside the home, all that stuff kind of got put on hold for several months while we were in the trenches taking care of our babies and our two toddlers. So in order of priority, it was like taking care of the babies that needed the instant attention and needs. And then after that, even before friends and going out and doing stuff for myself, was I need to maintain that relationship with my partner, with my wife, because we're so busy focused on the realities of all the hard stuff each day that if we're not consciously taking time for each other, then our relationship's going to start to deteriorate. And so we tried to make sure that we would set aside time just to talk to each other. Once things got a little more stable, we talked about a babysitter already in our chat today. So finding a babysitter to watch the kids just for a little bit of time so my wife and I could just leave the house, go out and do something even for a short amount of time was critical to maintaining our relationship. But as the twins mature, as they start to sleep through the night, as things get very predictable, then, okay, yeah, we can go out for longer dates. I can go out for longer dates with my wife, or I could go out and do an activity in the evening, or I could start to pick up a hobby again that I had left on the shelf before. It was just a matter of when that season arrived. So my identity in those early months in the first year was I was all in twin dad. I mean, I still had a job to juggle, but every waking hour was making sure that my kids and my wife were taken care of. And then ultimately I started to find more of myself after that. But I did have a lot of joy in being a dad in those, there was I didn't have any regrets about the things I was doing. It was an opportunity to connect with my kids, to be with them, to have fun with them, and I cherish those memories.
Beautiful. Lots of positives. Expect change, expect seasons. You've said that a few times. I think that is a beautiful way to summarize the experience of having multiples or just becoming a parent in general, is it is seasons. So expect it, be at peace with it, and enjoy it. It is very special when they're fresh, I will say, as much as it can be limited or broken sleep. It is beautiful. It's something about that which is quite magical. Now, postnatal depression, I guess the first one is identifying it in the mother. It can be statistically, it's more common with multiples to get postnatal depression. That can be from pre-existing trauma, from a birth that's traumatic, or from the sleep deprivation, or a number of things or pressures. If we start there, as the partner, how would you identify that and then help them to get support if that's something that you see?
Well, it starts during the pregnancy, having a conversation with your partner about that is a possibility that this may happen afterwards. and you may not be yourself. And what should I say to you to help identify, help you see that's what I'm observing as the partner, so that when the moment does arrive, your partner doesn't view it as an attack on her, or that you don't trust her, or so you want to have that conversation in the pregnancy so that you're ready if that possibility does happen. Because a lot of those things combine after the pregnancy, a lot of the emotions, and postnatal depression is a real thing that can happen. So you're looking for those symptoms in your partner, and then you try to call them out in a let's say in a ideal opportunity time. So just don't just throw it at her when everything is going crazy in the house. Try to find a quiet moment when you can talk about what you're observing, what you're feeling, and share your love for your partner, and that you want to help her, you want to be her partner to help her get over that. Call back to what you talked about during the pregnancy. It's like, hey, we talked about this being a possibility, that we may experience this. Maybe we should take the next step to call a doctor or call a therapist to get some help. There's no shame in getting help. There's no shame in reaching out to get support that you need. It doesn't show that you're incapable or weak or anything like that. It's just, we want the best for you and want you to get through this challenging time. So act as a teammate, as a companionship, to try to help to go through this together.
And what about for fathers? Because I think it's not necessarily well known that dads or partners can actually get postnatal depression as well. And again, that can be previous existing trauma. It can be observing a delivery that perhaps is unexpected, or can be the sleep deprivation and things after. Because obviously with women, it can also be the hormones mixed into that. What would you say to dads in terms of if they were experiencing that and how to manage out of that?
Yeah, it is a very real thing for dads too. I've talked to a few dads that have had trouble, some mental health challenges after the twins were born. And unfortunately, a lot of our attention is focused on your wife or your partner and focused on the babies. So you're not always thinking about yourself as the dad. But you do need to pay attention to how you're feeling. And if stuff does not feel right, then, or if you have the similar symptoms that we've talked about with postnatal depression for the mom, you need to seek out some kind of help or attention. That may just be starting to have a conversation with your partner. Be like, hey, honey, I'm not feeling right about this. What have you seen in me? Am I acting the way I used to act, or are there other things that have changed? And there's lots of ways that you can get help. You don't even have to go in person anymore. You can get online help with a therapist. So it's easier than ever to reach out to get some support. At a minimum, reach out to somebody, a friend, a family member. Online groups of dads, there's plenty of those as well. You can just, if you want to be anonymous, you can reach out and ask for tips or help or describe what you're feeling, and you can get feedback that way. Just do something to make some progress towards fixing the situation. Some of the dads I talked to that had this issue, once they realized it was a problem, then they would reach out and they got some help through a doctor or therapist, or even some medications to help manage that. So there's plenty of solutions out there. Just take one step forward to acknowledging maybe there's something wrong. What should I do next? And then go from there.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And then the next piece there is the relationship. So again, statistically with multiples, just because of the pressure, there can be a high instance of issues with relationships. Any thoughts again in terms of how to navigate through that if you're finding you're both not your best selves, whether from the fatigue or whatever it might be, and you've got other children? How would you identify that, and some thoughts on how you might work through any issues?
So rule number one is don't take anything personally. Don't take anything personally that your partner says to you, and it should work the other way around too. Like, because if you're both sleep deprived, you're going to say things and do things that are offensive to each other, that drive each other crazy, that could be downright mean if interpreted that way. And often that's due to you haven't got any sleep for 3 days, or there's hormones involved for your partner trying to recover, and that kind of clashes. There's some friction there. So if you're aware that that's a possibility going into this thing, just take every conversation you have with your partner, every interaction with them, from a perspective of not taking offense. Take that interaction from a perspective of love. You love your partner. you want to support them. Don't, take everything with a grain of salt and roll with it. And then when maybe you're not in the heat of the moment, maybe you had kind of a heated discussion, when things calm down, maybe you can ask about it then, where it's not so fresh, not so emotional. Be like, hey, yesterday you said this thing. What did you mean by that? And then you can dive into that without kind of escalating in that regard. I feel like you were with your partner before the kids were born, and so you're going to be with your partner hopefully, after the kids are grown up and leave the house. And so you need to work on that relationship between the two of you. So yes, a lot of attention's on the kids, on raising the kids, but you have to carve out time for each other to work on that relationship, to spend time together, to serve each other. And if you're doing that, it increases your chances of keeping that relationship through the ups and downs of all the things that are going to come your way.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully that's helpful to people, because it certainly can put you in a situation where you're not necessarily your best self. Now, any need to knows for raising twin toddlers, just at a high level, anything that you'd call out for people that are in amongst that or headed towards that stage?
Well, one thing in toddler age is potty training, because we don't want to be in diapers forever. With twins, we go through thousands and thousands of diapers. And we found that a rule in our family was, or I won't say a rule, but a saying in our household was, you cannot force your child to eat, sleep, or poop. And you just can't force them to do those things. You can create the environment where they would want to do those things. You can lead them to that, but you can't force them to sleep. You can't force them to eat, and you can't force them to poop, nor poop in the potty. So the reality is, with potty training, with our girls, we decided, based on their signals that they were giving us, that they may be ready for that phase. We went into the potty training experience. It turns out one of our girls was more ready than the other one. And so we're like, okay, well, we're going to focus on the twin that really wants to do this right now, and we'll wait on the other twin. So you don't have to do everything together. You don't have to do everything at the same time, which may be the tendency as parents of twins. We want to just group the twins together all the time. But in our case with potty training, reinforce what's working, or reinforce the positive behavior that you're seeing. One of our girls was really wanted to do potty training, and she did, and we would pour out positive praise and attention on her. And guess what? Her sister was watching, and her sister then changed her mind and also wanted the positive attention and praise. And so we were big fans of positive parenting, with reinforcing the good things we saw, not necessarily always calling out the bad things that we saw. So that way the kids were more drawn to do the good thing, the positive thing. Because if you're always yelling at them or correcting them for what they did wrong, that's what gets your attention, their attention for them, and so they may continue to do that. But if you're always giving them positive attention and reinforcement on the things you want them to do, they're going to do more of those things. So that took a conscious effort to always reinforce the positive, because the first tendency is to address what crazy thing that they did, but work on what they are doing right. Reinforce that behavior, and you'll see more of it.
So knowing that the two individuals is great. And it's funny you say that, because I'm right in the midst of toddler training, potty training our boys, and we have that too. One's just not as ready as the other. So that's fantastic advice. Now, this is a fun one. Twins in school. Now, going into school, I know from research that around 6 years old is the first real relationship, let's say, cracks that twins or multiples can experience, because they're starting to be formally measured, as opposed to before it wasn't quite as formal. And then you start to get comparisons and competition in a greater environment where you're more aware. What would you say to parents wanting to protect that twin or multiple relationship once they're going into school? What would your approach be?
Well, the big decision going into school is, do the twins go to the same classroom, or are they in separate classes? And sometimes where you live may determine that for you. The school may have a policy that twins are always separated or not. But usually you as a parent have a say, particularly in those early years, in preschool, kindergarten, elementary school. You can say, I would like my kids to be together in the same class. One thing that we had to consider was how dependent our twins were on each other. One of our girls wanted to be independent, wanted to do things by herself. Meanwhile, her sister wanted her twin, wanted her twin as a helper to help her get through stuff. And so on one hand, we had to weigh, well, do we separate them so that they can each learn some independence, or do we keep them together and maybe they become too dependent on each other? So those are things, knowing you will start to know your twins. By the time they go into school, you're going to know their personalities. You're going to know how they interact with each other. And you'll probably have a good hunch what would be best for them, if they should be together in school or if they should be separate. We had both situations over time where our girls were together. Sometimes they were separate. And there are pros and cons to both of those. The big pro of having them separate is they do have to stand on their own 2 feet. They do have to be independent. They cannot rely on their twin, which helps strengthen their own individual identity and their own individual skills. But they may still, if they're going to the same school, they may still have the same teachers. They may still have the same friend groups. And so there's a lot of overlap still, even if they're in separate classrooms. Plus, when they come home, they're still together all the time. So if you're worried about the twin bond somehow being damaged or broken, your twins are still going to spend a lot of time together, even if they're in school, separate at school. They're still going to be together at home. Both of those worked for us, together and separate, and they both have their pros and cons. So another thing to keep in mind is that it's okay to change. It's okay to change your mind. If this year you have them together, you observe that behavior, and then you're like, well, next year let's try separate, or vice versa. Because sometimes you don't know until they're actually in that situation how they will react. Also talk a lot to the teachers, because the teachers are going to be with your twins all day long, and they will see that connection, or maybe the codependency that your twins have, and your teachers can give some recommendations, or you can talk with them about how to best handle those situations in the classroom.
And did you ever have to have conversations with your girls about maintaining care for each other in situations during school where they were at loggerheads, or one was, let's say, good at English and one was good at math at that time? Because I must say it does go up and down. I'm a twin as well. But did you ever have to have any conversations with how they might still remain caring for each other in that environment where they're starting to get different friend groups and different activities?
Yes, going back to reinforcing positive things, like recognizing that each of our twins are very different, even though they look the same to a lot of people, they're just completely different individuals. And so they have different interests. They excel at different things. They do good in some subjects and others. And so praising and reinforcing and celebrating the good things that they're doing, and recognizing that they are special to each of the kids is different, went a long way. So that you as the parents are celebrating each of the twins, but then the twins themselves see, oh, my sister's really good at this thing too. So that's pretty cool. Let's go celebrate that, or support her in that endeavor as well. And that way we found that our kids have all been very supportive of each other. They haven't really been competitive with one another, but they kind of celebrate the victories that each kid has in their respective fields, whether it's the classroom or if it's in sports or extracurricular activities.
I love that. So celebrating, encouraging the whole family to celebrate everyone's individual achievements, especially with the twins, celebrating that one has done this, one's done that. So it's a reinforced behavior. That is wonderful. That is actually such great advice as a twin. I can tell you that's a really, really good way to approach it. So let's head to our last question. What are the biggest trends you've seen, Joe? 17 years speaking to dads of twins. What have you seen in terms of the role and societal expectations change over the years?
Yeah, the dads want to be more and more involved in fatherhood and parenting. When I look back at my parents, previous generations, there was kind of the separation between the father and the children, and that's no longer the case. Dads really want to be involved in supporting their partner through the pregnancy. They want to be involved, taking care of the kids early on, and that's an awesome thing to see, because the more a dad can be involved in their children's lives, I feel the better the kids are going to be set up for the future, to have success and have good relationships in their own lives going forward. So I feel like the dads worry a lot about what can they do to support their partner. Dads worry a lot about what they can do to help their children. And oftentimes dads put the needs of their partner and their children ahead of their own needs. And there's a time and a place for that. But dads, you have to also remember to, take care of yourself, or you're going to run out of gas and not going to be able to support your family the best way that you can. So be involved as much as you can. 17 years, like looking at my own experience, I mean, it seemed like just yesterday, the kids are all babies and now they're all going off to college, driving cars and doing grown up things. So it's I know it's kind of cliche to think about, enjoy those quickly passing moments, but it's true. They do pass really quickly. In the moment, the day of, it seems that everything drags out, time slows down. But when you look back, it goes really, really fast. So enjoy those memories while you're in them.
Wonderful advice. And then to round that out, if there's any mums listening or even dads that want to articulate their different way of processing, because there is a hormonal difference and I guess I could say cultural difference, again, a spectrum. How would you say that dads and partners differ in terms of how they think and communicate and approach things? And what should mums know about that to better understand and work with them?
So dads tend to maybe put on the hat and the role of being the provider or the protector. So a lot of concerns around finances and logistics and day-to-day scheduling and operations, because those are kind of things that we can kind of control. Like we cannot control anything about the health of baby or mom during the pregnancy. We cannot control what the babies are going to do when they get here, but we can focus on practical things. We can focus on getting the house ready or reworking the budget or working harder to make some money to support the increased expenses of having twins. So we're worried about a lot of those things to try to make sure that we can still make it through the challenge of infants and beyond. Dads, they want to maintain that connection with their partner, and we cannot read mom's mind. We don't know what she's thinking, and so you have to have open and honest communication with your partner to make this whole thing work and succeed. And so start those conversations now. If you're expecting twins, start building the habit of having conversations, talking about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your plans are for the future, how you're going to do things. Because you can't just start that once the babies arrive if you haven't established that habit working as a partnership to do those things. So dads want to communicate. We want to help support the family, our partner, and their kids. We want one-on-one time with the kids. We want to spend time with our kids as a group. We want to spend time one-on-one to build that partnership and bond with each of our children. We want to spend one-on-one time with our partner. We want to go, maintain that relationship, strengthen that relationship through time as well. So carve out time for date night with your partner. Carve out time for, daddy-daughter activity, which is one of the twins. And then the next week you go out and do something else with the other twin. So that the twins aren't always grouped together from a father perspective or a parenting perspective. You're kind of fostering individual memories and relationship with each child.
Thank you, Joe. Now I'll go to an audience question. What have we got here? Let's go for a comedic one. What was one of the funniest, most chaotic twin moment that you can recall?
Okay, so the most chaotic twin moment, when we were just talking about potty training, toilet training, we only had one toilet in the bathroom. And so when both girls needed to go to the bathroom, there was just one toilet with one of those little trainer seats that would go on top of the toilet. And so it only took once for us, when both girls ran in there to go to the bathroom, and to fight over that, for us to realize we needed a second little potty so that they could have both the opportunity to go to the bathroom without making a huge mess in that regard. My ongoing struggle with my girls, because they are identical, is calling out the wrong name when I am looking at them from behind or across the room. And so I'm always trying to cover that up, and they can see right through it. Like I'll morph the words coming out of my mouth to the other girl's name, or try to say something silly to distract them from the fact they're like, Dad, like, I know your sister was just here behind me and now you're here behind me. I'm sorry. I thought it was the other one. So that doesn't, yeah, that's always a fun, we always laugh about that because that still happens today. They're, like I said, they're 17 and I still occasionally get them mixed up from when I'm not paying full attention to each of them.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think anyone's going to nail that. I don't know. I'm not identical, and my dad got my name wrong up until this day. So I think it's just a parenting challenge, isn't it? And if they look similar, good luck to you. I mean,
Right.
you definitely got your hands full with that one. I don't know how you work through that, but thank you for sharing. Anything else that you want to share, Joe? Last thoughts?
Yeah. So if you're listening and are expecting twins or in the middle of the adventure of twins right now, just remember that today's challenge is, you're going to figure it out. You're going to figure out today's challenge and it's going to be okay. It may feel like the end of the world right now because they're not sleeping or they're teething or they're not, you're not breastfeeding. They can't get a latch and breastfeed properly. All these are challenges that you're going to work through, and over the twins are going to come through them, and it's going to be okay on the other side. Focus on what you can control, and everything else you're just going to have to roll with those surprises. But it's all going to work out in the end, and have fun on the adventure, because not a lot of people get the privilege of having twins, and so it's a very fun adventure, and you're going to have experiences that your friends that have just one or two kids, they don't get to enjoy everything that you get as a twin parent. So have fun.
Great, great final thought. Thank you, Joe. Well, Joe, it has been an absolute pleasure. And I will call out to the audience, we do have an exciting giveaway, which we will be launching with this episode. So if you're listening now, you will know that it's live. So make sure that you go and click the link and enter. And Joe, I'll link your details as well in the notes so people can check you out. Joe, I've really enjoyed this. I hope that the audience have found this really valuable, and any mums listening have learned a little bit more about a dad's perspective. Any fathers listening are now feeling much more equipped and peaceful. That's certainly how I feel in terms of your approach. Very peaceful, very realistic, with a little bit of humour. So, Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Now, if you enjoy this show, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'd love it if you could give us a rating so that we can get this show sent to more parents just like you to help them thrive rather than just survive.